Dejen de sentirse víctimas. Dejen de conmiserarse. Dejen de sentir autolástima. Y por eso invité al doctor Sean Grover, que es un gran psicoterapeuta, desde la ciudad de Nueva York, a hablar con ustedes el día de hoy, porque Sean ha tenido pacientes que se sienten miserables, que generan automiseria, que se sienten víctimas. Y no hay nada peor que ponerte en el papel de víctima. Y por eso está Sean con nosotros. Entonces, sí existe la miseria autogenerada y el victimismo. So, Sean, welcome. Happy New Year. Happy to have you back on the show. And I love the subject that we're talking about today.
Absolutely. This is a big one. You know, people come to therapy looking for solutions, but a lot of the problems are self-generated misery.
This is what I always say. On top of everything, misery loves company.
Absolutely. So people, look what people do. They change their jobs, they'll change relationships, they'll move to a new place, and they feel good for a short amount of time, but eventually that old feeling of misery begins to creep in because they're not really dealing with the underlying causes.
So where does the problem come from?
Well, there's really two ways of looking at it. There's sort of passive approaches that generate misery. Now, we all know these, right? Passive, not exercising, not dieting, being isolated, looking for quick fixes to like feel better. So sitting at home scrolling through your phone may offer you some relief, but in the long term, it's not going to deliver you any sustainable happiness.
So
what we're looking at, so the first is passive forms that undermine happiness. And the second one we also know, which is actively undermining your happiness. These are self-destructive choices. Very obvious, right? Drugs, alcohol, isolating yourself. These are choices you make, or just being defiant or not managing your anger. It may feel great to yell at someone in a store. You get some relief, but again, this is not going to lead anywhere.
Or even always looking for toxic relationships.
That's right.
Doing things that are not good for you.
You're searching for happiness outside of yourself. You're looking to be saved, but you're losing the battle.
So we got those two versions of misery, the passive and the active. Absolutely. And sometimes it's combined.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, because people are very complicated. You know, they think they're doing the right thing, but they're really just looking for some relief, and they're not considering that short-term relief doesn't lead to sustainable long-term happiness.
Why does that happen? Why do we do this?
Okay, well, let's look at the telltale signs. You can take this little test yourself, right?
Okay.
If you find yourself blaming everyone for everything, if your favorite hobby is complaining, if you're a victim, if you're, this is my favorite one for people my age, nostalgia. Oh, things were so great way back then. Things were so much better. Well, if you read one, and I recently reread one of my journals when I was in my 20s, haven't seen it in 30 years. I read it, I thought, oh my God, things actually weren't that great. I just edited it in my memory. But those attitudes really destroy happiness, and you got to identify them in yourself.
Okay, so repeat the four of them again.
Blame, complain, victimizing, and nostalgia.
Got that laid down. Go.
The other thing I want to point out is like how you relieve your stress, right? There's a woman I work with. She came into her therapy group with me and said her boss insulted her. And she was very upset, very hurt by what he said. So we all said, what did you do? So she said, well, I went home, I baked a plate of brownies, and I ate them all. All right, so she felt better, I imagine. But why is she in therapy? Because she's very concerned about these habits. So what she did to feel better in the moment contributed to much longer term unhappiness and misery.
And you know what, Sean? I always talk on the show about the destructive vicious cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes a series of unfortunate events, and you fall into this downward spiral of negative, self-destructive things until one day you snap and you spring back into your virtuous cycle. But I think that many of us are between those circles all our life.
That's right. And we're really battling ourselves. We don't even notice it, but we're doing things that undermine ourselves all the time. People hire me to be their therapist, and they want help, and they're desperate to, and they pay me good money to get help. And then yesterday it was snowing and it was cold, not so bad, but how many people are like, oh, I don't want to leave the house. Oh, I don't want to make the trip to the office. They're so easily defeated by every little obstacle that it's hard for them to make progress under those conditions.
So not letting yourself be defeated by the little obstacles.
There's going to be obstacles. Life is full of obstacles. We're not really interested. Look, if you lose a job or you have these external obstacles, it's very dramatic. These are the things of great literature and movies. The hero rises above and defeats the villain. But when that obstacle is internal, it's not as easy.
Vamos con Sean a una lista de preguntas que quiero que se hagan todos el día de hoy para identificar cuáles son las conductas que ustedes tienen que generan un gran problema y evitan que sean más felices de lo que pueden ser. So what I said in Spanish is, now that we understand the problem and what we do every day to generate misery in our lives, these are the questions everybody needs to ask themselves today.
That's right.
Okay.
And you have to be prepared because this is going to be a challenge. This is going to be really hard to confront yourself about behaviors that undermine your happiness. So this is nothing you can do casually. You think it's going to be easy and you're going to quit if it gets hard. This is going to require like sustained, consistent effort.
I am ready.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify those behaviors. You can make a list. You can talk with your friends about it. You can actually have a friend hold you accountable for these things. If that's a good friend, they're going to back you up on this. So the first step, identifying the behaviors. Do you spend too much time on social media? Is your sleep schedule messed up? Do you procrastinate all the time? Just make a list. How do you get in your own way?
2.
Number 2, now you're going to target those behaviors. You know what those behaviors are, and you're going to look to introduce new behaviors. Like, for example, if you don't leave the house, you're going to say, I'm leaving the house 3 times a week. I'm going to the gym twice a week. And then creative things. I'm going to go to a concert. I'm going to go to a dance performance. I'm going to write for 30 minutes in the morning. A lot of people call that the morning pages. All these efforts to introduce more active and creative choices to confront the behaviors that you've identified.
Okay, understood. Next one.
Now, during this struggle, you're going to have to practice much more self-care. That means you're going to have to take better care of yourself in terms of your sleep and your eating. You're going to find ways of encouraging yourself. You're going to feel discouraged. You're going to have maybe a workout buddy. You're going to have a friend you can call when you're feeling like giving up. These are all forms of self-care that will bring energy so that you can continue the struggle to win over these negative habits.
I think that particularly in this month, when we come back from the lack of order and structure of vacations, of not doing anything, of not eating right, of not sleeping well, of not exercising, of not having, discipline in your life, without knowing, you could be having like a mild depression. And I was telling the audience that last week, I was feeling very out of sorts. And this week, when I came back to training and eating right and sleeping well, and with my discipline and my structure and my order in my life, professionally, in my house, when you get your shit together, you automatically start feeling better about yourself and about life.
That's right. If you have structures, you have all these support systems, you enjoy your work, you love your work, you're going to live much longer. So what you're doing is really number 4, which is you're rewarding yourself. When you do things well, it feels good. There's a woman I saw for many years. She said, every time I come and do a therapy session, I go to my favorite bakery and I get a cookie. She said, I got a cookie because I went to therapy. And her whole life was surrounded about acknowledging, I'm working hard, I'm trying to grow, I deserve a reward. So rewarding yourself and taking a moment and giving yourself a pat on the back is part of the process.
Okay, and then there's one last thing we need to do.
All right, the one last thing, you have to keep your eye on the prize. You have to realize that this is going to pay off. There's going to be ups and downs. There are going to be struggles. It's a lonely battle confronting these things. It will take time, but remember how good you will feel. Many people can start a marathon, but not everyone crosses the finish line. How good it feels to cross that finish line. So keep your eye on that. Don't lose focus.
Thank you very much, Sean, for being on the show as always and for making us think.
Take care. Bye-bye.